She was just a tired waitress saving a stranger's life in a crowded diner. Little did she know, the elderly woman gasping for air was the mother of a notorious mafia boss. The moment she refused his money, everything was destined to change. Myra's feet were absolutely killing her. She'd been standing for 11 hours straight, and the dinner rush at Sal's diner showed zero signs of slowing down. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed annoyingly as she balanced 3 plates on her left arm and grabbed 2 more with her right hand. Table 6 needed ketchup. Table 9 wanted their check, like 15 minutes ago. The coffee pot was empty again. "Order up," Danny shouted from the kitchen, his voice slicing through the cacophony of clinking dishes and chattering customers. Mira delivered the plates with her trademark smile, the one that helped her earn decent tips even though exhaustion was practically etched under her eyes. She was 26, but felt more like 40 on nights like this. 2 jobs, a teenage brother to raise, and rent that was due whether she felt like it or not. Miss, a sharp voice jolted her out of her thoughts. Mira turned to see a well-dressed woman in her 70s at table 12, waving her hands frantically. The woman's face had turned pale as a ghost, and she was clutching at her chest. Her companion, a younger man in an expensive suit, stood frozen, his phone halfway to his ear. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. Mira dropped the coffee pot she'd been holding. It shattered on the tile floor, sending shards flying, but she was already moving. The other waitress, Paula, gasped. Customers turned to stare, but Mira was laser-focused, her body operating purely on instinct and the CPR training she'd gotten years ago when she worked at a summer camp. "Mom, ma'am, can you hear me?" Mira reached the table just as the woman slumped forward. The man in the suit caught her, gently easing her to the floor. "She has a heart condition," he said, his voice tight with controlled panic. "I'm calling an ambulance." Mira dropped to her knees beside the woman. No pulse, no breathing. "Does anyone know CPR?" she shouted, but she was already tilting the woman's head back, checking her airway. The diner had fallen silent, except for the man's urgent voice, giving the address to 911. Mira positioned her hands on the woman's chest, interlaced her fingers, and began compressions, hard and fast, just like she'd been taught. 30 compressions. 2 rescue breaths. Again. "Come on," Mira whispered between compressions. "Stay with me." The woman's designer handbag lay on its side, its contents spilled across the floor. A lipstick, reading glasses, a leather wallet with a silver clasp. Mira barely noticed. Her arms burned. Sweat trickled down her temple. She counted in her head, maintaining the rhythm. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. "The ambulance is 5 minutes out," the man said, kneeling across from her. His hands were shaking. "She's going to make it," Mira said. Even though she wasn't sure, she just needed to believe it. Needed him to believe it. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. A minute passed, then 2. Myra's muscles screamed in protest, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Somewhere in the background, she heard Paula crying. Danny had come out from the kitchen, phone in hand, either recording or ready to help. She couldn't tell which. Then a gasp. The woman's chest heaved on its own. Her eyes fluttered open, confused and frightened. She coughed, drawing in ragged breaths that sounded like the most beautiful music Mira had ever heard. "You're okay?" Mira said softly, keeping her hand on the woman's shoulder. "You're okay. Help is coming." The woman's eyes found Mira's face. Her lips moved, but no words came out. Her hand, trembling and cold, reached up and clasped Myra's wrist with surprising strength. "Don't try to talk," Mira said. "Just breathe nice and slow." The wail of sirens grew louder. The man in the suit was talking rapidly, explaining the situation, but his eyes never left the woman on the floor. His mother, Mira realized, seeing the raw terror and love mixed in his gaze. The paramedics burst through the door 3 minutes later, equipment in hand, moving with practiced efficiency. Mira stepped back, her legs suddenly feeling like jelly. Paula caught her arm, steadying her. "You saved her life," Paula whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Mira, you saved her life." But Mira wasn't thinking about that. She was watching the paramedics work, watching them load the woman onto a stretcher, watching the man in the suit follow them out to the ambulance. He paused at the door, turned back, and locked eyes with Mira across the crowded diner. "Thank you," he mouthed. Then he was gone. The door swung shut, the ambulance sped away, sirens fading into the night, and slowly, the diner came back to life. Customers began talking again, though in hushed tones. Danny returned to the kitchen. Paula started cleaning up the broken coffee pot. Mira stood there, hands still shaking, the adrenaline draining from her system and leaving her feeling hollow. "You okay, honey?" Sal himself had emerged from the back office, his weathered face creased with concern. "Yeah," Mira said. "Yeah, I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. She was thinking about the woman's face, the way her hand had clutched Myra's wrist. She was thinking about the man in the suit and the expensive watch on his wrist, which probably cost more than Mira made in a year. She was thinking about how fragile life was, how quickly everything could change. "Take 5, Sal said gently. "Go splash some water on your face." Mira nodded and headed to the bathroom. She locked the door behind her, turned on the faucet, and let the cold water run over her hands. When she looked up at her reflection, she barely recognized herself. Her ponytail had come loose, strands framing her tired face. Her uniform was wrinkled and stained. Her eyes were wide, still processing what had just happened. A life. She'd saved a life. She dried her hands on a paper towel and straightened her shoulders. She still had 4 hours left on her shift, and rent was due in 3 days. There was no time to fall apart. When she emerged from the bathroom, the diner had mostly returned to normal. But as she picked up her order pad and forced her tired feet to move, Mira didn't notice the black sedan that had pulled up across the street, or the man inside it, watching the diner with cold, calculating eyes. The next morning came way too soon. Myra's alarm clock screamed at 6 a.m., dragging her from a dreamless sleep. Her arms ached from the CPR compressions, a dull throb that served as a reminder that last night had been real. She'd saved someone's life, then finished her shift, gone home, checked on her brother Tyler, and collapsed into bed at 2 a.m. Now it was time to do it all over again. She shuffled into the kitchen of their cramped 2-bedroom apartment, finding Tyler already awake, textbooks spread across the small table. He was 17, a senior in high school, and brilliant in a way that made Myra's heart ache with both pride and worry. Brilliant kids needed college, and college needed money they didn't have. "You're up early," she said, starting the coffee maker. "Chemistry test." He didn't look up from his notes. "Heard you coming in late." "Long shift, huh, Mira?" He finally met her eyes, his expression serious beyond his years. "Paula called. She told me what happened." Mira sighed. "Of course she did. You saved someone's life." His voice cracked slightly. "That's not nothing." She crossed to him, pressed a kiss to the top of his head. "It was just CPR. Anyone would have done it. But they didn't. You did." He grabbed her hand, squeezed it tight. "Mom and Dad would be proud." The words hit her like a physical blow. Their parents had died 4 years ago, victims of a drunk driver. Wrong place, wrong time. Mira had been 22, Tyler 13. She'd fought tooth and nail to keep him out of the system, dropped out of community college, and worked herself to the bone to make sure he had a chance at the life she'd lost. "Get back to studying," she said, her voice rough with emotion. "Ace that test." By the time Mira reached Sal's diner at 10 a.m., the morning rush was already in full swing. But something was definitely off. The moment she pushed through the door, the conversation seemed to die down and all heads turned in her direction. Paula practically ran across the diner to grab her. "Mira! Oh my God! Have you heard?" "Heard what?" Danny emerged from the kitchen, his face ashen. Even Sal had come out from his office, which almost never happened during business hours. The air felt thick, charged with a strange tension that Mira couldn't quite place. "The woman you saved," Paula said, gripping Myra's arm. "Do you even know who she is?" "A customer," Mira said slowly, confused by the reaction. "An older woman with a heart condition." "Margaret Voss," Sal said quietly, his voice barely audible. Her name is Margaret Voss. The name meant absolutely nothing to Mira. She looked around at the faces staring at her, waiting for some kind of understanding to dawn. Am I supposed to know who that is? Paula's eyes widened in disbelief. You really don't know? Know what? She's Adrian Voss's mother, Danny said, his voice barely a whisper. The name Adrian Voss hung in the air like a thundercloud, instantly changing the atmosphere of the entire diner. Mira watched as recognition spread across the faces around her. The eavesdropping customers, the cook in the kitchen window, even old Mr. Chun, who came in every day for his black coffee and toast. Who's Adrian Voss? Mira asked, completely bewildered. Sal pulled her aside, away from the curious ears. His expression was grave. Adrian Voss runs half the organized crime on the East Coast. Gambling, protection rackets, loan sharking, you name it, he's got his fingers in it. He's not someone you want to be connected to, honey. The words didn't compute at first. Myra's brain struggled to connect the image of the elegant, frightened woman from last night to the world Sal was describing. The mafia, crime, violence. That man with her, Mira said slowly, piecing it together. The one in the expensive suit. That was probably one of his associates. Paula chimed in, having followed them. Adrian doesn't go anywhere without security. His mother is the only soft spot he has. Everyone knows that. Mira's legs felt weak. She pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. I just did CPR. I didn't know. Of course you didn't, Sal said kindly, patting her shoulder. You did the right thing. You saved a woman's life. But Mira, listen to me carefully. These people, they're not like us. They have their own rules, their own way of doing things. What does that even mean? It means they might come back, Danny said from across the room, his eyes darting nervously. To thank you, to pay you off, to make sure you don't talk to anyone about what happened. But nothing happened, Mira protested, her voice rising slightly. A woman had a heart attack. I helped her, that's all. Sal exchanged a look with Paula, a look that made Myra's stomach clench with dread. In their world, nothing is ever that simple. The day passed in a blur of whispered conversations and furtive glances. Customers whispered and stared, some asking questions Mira couldn't answer, others suddenly becoming intensely interested in their food and avoiding eye contact completely. The black sedan across the street, the one Mira hadn't even noticed last night, was still there. She definitely noticed it now. During her break, Mira searched Adrian Voss on her phone. The search results made her blood run cold. Federal investigations, suspected connections to multiple murders, a man who'd built an empire on fear and violence, a man whose mother she'd saved. She thought about Margaret Voss's hand clutching her wrist, the profound gratitude in those fading eyes. She thought about the man in the suit, the way he looked at his mother with such desperate love. Monsters didn't love their mothers, did they? But as the sun began to set and Myra's shift drew to a close, the black sedan across the street finally pulled away. And, just 3 blocks down, it was promptly replaced by another one. Someone was definitely watching, and Mira had a sinking feeling that her life, as she knew it, was about to change forever. The black cars arrived at exactly 2 p.m. The next day, Mira was refilling salt shakers when she heard the engine's low, expensive purr, a sound that definitely didn't belong in her neighborhood. Through the diner's front window, she watched 3 black SUVs pull up to the curb in perfect formation. Her hands froze mid-pour, salt crystals scattering across the table. Oh God! Paula whispered from behind the counter, her voice trembling. He's here. The diner went deathly silent. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Coffee cups paused at lips. Even the jukebox seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, the current song ending with no one moving to select another. The door opened. He entered alone, but his presence seemed to fill the entire space. Adrian Voss was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair streaked with gray at the temples and eyes that looked like they'd seen things Mira couldn't even imagine. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than 3 months of her rent, and he moved with the quiet confidence of a man who'd never been told no. Every instinct Mira possessed screamed at her to look away, to pretend she was invisible. But she couldn't. She stood there, salt shaker clutched in her hand, as those cold eyes swept the room and finally landed on her. He didn't smile, didn't threaten. He simply looked at her with an intensity that made her feel completely transparent. "Who saved my mother?" His voice was deep, controlled, terrifyingly calm. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Mira felt every eye in the diner turn toward her. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to hide, to run, to be anywhere but here. Instead, she set down the salt shaker, trying to keep her hand from visibly trembling. "I did." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Adrian Voss crossed the diner in 4 long strides. Up close, she could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the shadows under his eyes that spoke of countless sleepless nights, the tight clench of tension in his jaw. This was a man who carried violence in his bones. But right now he just looked tired. "What's your name?" "Mira. Mira Chun." He studied her face, his gaze intense, like he was trying to memorize every detail. "My mother is alive because of you. I just did what anyone would do." "No." The word was sharp, final, leaving no room for argument. "Most people freeze. Most people wait for someone else to act. You didn't." He reached into his jacket. Mira flinched, unable to help herself. But he only pulled out an envelope, thick and white. He placed it on the counter between them. $50,000, he said quietly. "It's not enough, but it's a start." The number didn't even register as real. Mira stared at the envelope like it might actually bite her. $50,000. She could pay off their debts, fund Tyler's college education, move to a new apartment, completely change their lives. But then she thought about her parents, about the way her father had looked at the dirty cops who tried to shake him down at his restaurant. She thought about her mother's voice, firm and unwavering. Asterisk, "We don't owe anyone anything, and no one owns us." "I can't accept that," Mira said softly, her voice barely a whisper. The diner erupted in barely suppressed gasps. Adrian Voss's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe? Or confusion. "Why not?" "Because I didn't save your mother for money." Mira met his gaze, forcing herself not to look away. "I saved her because she needed help. That's all there is to it. Everyone wants something. I want to go back to work." She picked up her salt shaker again, her hands feeling steadier now. "And I want you to know that your mother seemed like a lovely person. I'm glad she's okay." For a long moment, Adrian Voss didn't move. He stood there, this man who commanded fear from everyone he met, looking at a tired waitress in a stained uniform who'd just turned down more money than she'd likely see in 2 years. Finally, he picked up the envelope and slid it back into his jacket. "You're not afraid of me," he said. "It wasn't a question." "I'm terrified of you," Mira admitted honestly. "But I still can't take your money. It wouldn't be right." Something almost like respect flickered across his face. He pulled a business card from his pocket-heavy cardstock, embossed lettering, and placed it where the envelope had been. "If you ever need anything, anything at all." He paused, his voice softening slightly. "My mother asked about you. She wants to thank you herself." "That's not necessary." "It is to her." His voice softened slightly. "She's a stubborn woman." Despite everything, Mira almost smiled. "She sounds nice." Adrian Voss nodded once, a sharp, almost imperceptible movement. Then he turned and walked back toward the door. He had his hand on the handle when he paused and looked back. "Mira Chun." "Yes, you have a brother, Tyler, a senior at Lincoln High." It wasn't a question. He knew. Of course he knew. He's a smart kid. Grades good enough for any college he wants. Myra's blood ran cold. The implied threat, or perhaps it was a promise, hung heavy in the air. But Adrian Voss's next words surprised her. "Make sure he stays safe. This neighborhood isn't always kind to good people." He opened the door. "I'll have someone watching the area. No one will bother you or your brother." Then he was gone, climbing into the middle SUV. The vehicles pulled away in the same perfect formation they'd arrived in, leaving only the faint scent of expensive cologne and the business card on the counter. Mira picked it up with shaking hands. No name, no title, just a phone number in raised black letters. Girl, Paula breathed, appearing at her elbow. Do you have any idea what just happened? Mira stared at the card, her mind reeling. I think I just met the devil. The devil just offered you protection. Paula corrected, her voice filled with awe, and that, Mira realized, might be even more dangerous than his anger. 3 days passed, and Mira couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Not in a threatening way, though. That was the strange part. She'd catch glimpses of unfamiliar cars on her street. Always different ones. Always parked with a clear view of her apartment building. When she walked Tyler to school, she'd notice a man in a coffee shop who seemed to be reading the same page of his newspaper for 20 minutes. At the grocery store, a woman in sunglasses browsed the same aisle as Mira, never putting anything in her cart. Protection, Adrian Voss had called it. Felt more like living in a fishbowl. Tyler had noticed, too. That guy's been following us for 2 blocks, he muttered one morning as they walked to the bus stop. I know, Mira said quietly. Just ignore him. Ignore him? Mira, what's going on? Did that boss come to the diner? Is this about that woman you saved? She tried to keep it from him, but of course, the neighborhood talked. Everyone at Sal's diner had a cousin who had a friend who knew someone. And within 48 hours, half the block knew that Mira Chun had saved Margaret Voss and lived to tell about it. It's nothing, she lied, trying to sound convincing. He was just grateful, that's all. Then why are we being followed? We're not. She stopped, realizing that Tyler was way too smart for lies. He's just being cautious, making sure no one gives us trouble because of what happened. Tyler's face went pale. Are we in danger? No, Mira said firmly, pulling him close. No, baby. I promise it's just complicated. But she wasn't sure that was true. At night, she'd lie awake thinking about Adrian Voss's words. Asterisk, everyone wants something. Asterisk, he'd been so certain, so confused when she'd turned down his money. Like she'd broken some fundamental rule of his world. The business card sat in her nightstand drawer. She'd pick it up sometimes, run her thumb over the embossed numbers, and wonder what would happen if she called. What would she even say? Asterisk, thank you for the invisible bodyguards, but they're freaking out my teenage brother? On the 4th day, everything changed. Mira was working the lunch shift when Sal called her into his office. His face was serious, uncomfortable, in a way that made her stomach drop. Mira, honey, sit down. What's wrong? Did I do something? No, nothing like that. He rubbed his face tiredly. I got a visit this morning before you came in. She didn't need to ask from whom. Mr. Voss. One of his people. Very polite, very professional. Sal's laugh was bitter. Told me that if I ever needed anything, permits, inspections, supplier problems, I should call this number. He slid a card across the desk. Same design as Mira's, different number. I don't understand. He's showing respect, Sal explained, his voice heavy. In his world, you saved his mother's life. That creates a debt. And since you won't let him pay you directly, he's going to take care of the people around you, whether you like it or not. Myra's hands clenched in her lap. I don't want this. I know, but it's not really about what you want anymore. Sal's eyes were kind but sad. These people, they operate on loyalty and obligation. You did something good, something pure, and now you're tangled up in their world. The best thing you can do is just let it be. Let it be? Let it be? Sal, I have a brother to think about. I can't have the Mafia deciding they own me. They don't own you. That's not what this is. He leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. Mira, I've lived in this city a long time. I've seen what happens when the Voss family feels disrespected. But I've also seen what happens to people they choose to protect. Nothing bad touches them. Ever. The words should have been comforting. Instead, they felt like a cage closing in around her. That evening, as Mira walked home through the early autumn dusk, her phone rang. Unknown number. Her thumb hovered over the decline button, but something made her answer. Miss Chun? The voice was female, older, warm, with a slight tremor. This is Margaret Voss. Mira stopped dead in the middle of the sidewalk. People flowed around her like water around a stone. Mrs. Voss, How are you feeling? Better, thanks to you. There was genuine emotion in her voice. I've been trying to reach you through my son, but he tells me you're a stubborn young woman. Despite everything, Mira smiled. He's one to talk. Margaret laughed. A sound like wind chimes, light and unexpected. Yes, well, stubbornness runs in our family, Miss Chun. And I know you refused Adrian's money. That speaks to your character. But would you refuse an old woman's request to meet you? No obligations, no gifts, just tea and conversation. I'd very much like to thank you properly. Mira should have said no. Should have drawn a line right there. Kept her distance. Protected herself and Tyler from this world. But there was something in Margaret's voice, a loneliness, maybe, or a genuine warmth, that made her hesitate. I work double shifts most days, Mira said slowly. What's your next day off? Sunday. Perfect. I'll send a car at 2 o'clock. I promise, no pressure. Margaret's voice softened even further. You gave me more time with my son. The least I can do is give you a proper thank you. The line went dead before Mira could even argue. She just stood there, phone still in her hand, watching the shadows lengthen across the sidewalk. The guy who'd been tailing her, keeping a low profile, was still there. Today, he was rocking a gray jacket, pretending to be glued to his own phone. Mira's mom's words echoed in her head. We don't owe anyone anything, but maybe, just maybe, some debts were worth settling. The car, a black town car, pulled up right on time at 2 p.m. on Sunday. Mira had spent the whole morning fighting with Tyler, who was convinced that meeting Margaret Voss was a seriously bad idea. He dug up old news articles, online stories about Adrian Voss, federal investigations, whispers of violence. Nothing ever stuck, but the pattern was crystal clear. This is how it always starts, Tyler had said, pacing back and forth in their tiny living room. First, it's just tea, then favors, and before you know it, we're in so deep we can't get out. It's just tea with an old lady, Mira had shot back. But deep down, she wasn't entirely convinced either. Now, as she climbed into the black car, she wondered if Tyler had been right all along. The driver was all politeness, totally professional, and completely quiet. Classical music played softly through the speakers. The seats were leather, probably worth more than everything she owned in her entire apartment. They drove for 40 minutes, leaving the city far behind and winding through progressively fancier neighborhoods. The houses got bigger, the lawns wider, and the trees looked like they'd been standing there for centuries. Finally, they turned through iron gates that opened automatically, following a private drive to a house that took Mira's breath away. It wasn't exactly a mansion, but it was beautiful in a subtle way. All stone and windows with ivy snaking up the walls. A garden encircled the house, still bursting with color even though the season was late. Somewhere nearby, a fountain tinkled. The driver opened her door. Mrs. Voss is in the conservatory, Mississippi. Just go through the house and turn left. Mira's sneakers felt totally out of place on the marble entryway. Everything here was elegant, expensive, carefully curated. She passed rooms filled with antique furniture, walls lined with paintings that could have been originals. But there were personal touches too. Framed photographs, a child's drawing proudly displayed, and fresh flowers in every room. The conservatory was all glass and light, filled with plants and comfy chairs. And there, in a wingback chair with a blanket across her lap, sat Margaret Voss. She looked smaller than Mira remembered, more frail, but her eyes were sharp and kind when she smiled. Mira, she said, offering her hand. Take a seat. You're even more beautiful than Adrian described. Mira took her hand, soft skin, but a surprisingly firm grip. Thank you for inviting me, Mrs. Voss. Margaret, please. Mrs. Voss makes me feel ancient. She gestured to the chair across from her. Tea? A woman, who Mira hadn't noticed before. Maybe the housekeeper poured tea from a delicate pot. Real china, not mugs. The tea smelled like jasmine and honey. I won't keep you long, Margaret said once they were alone. I know you work hard. Multiple jobs, isn't it? And raising your brother all on your own. The research didn't surprise Mira, but it still made her uneasy. Tyler's a good kid. It's not as hard as people think. Nonsense. It's exactly as hard as people think. Probably harder. Margaret's eyes were knowing. I raised Adrian alone after his father died. I know what it cost. Mira sipped her tea, unsure of what to say. This woman had saved her life in a way. Given her son whatever humanity he had left. But she'd also raised the most feared man on the East Coast. You're wondering about me, Margaret said gently. About how a woman like me has a son like Adrian. She smiled. It's all right. I wonder sometimes too. Margaret gazed out at the garden. His father was in the business. I tried to keep Adrian away from it. Sent him to good schools. Hoped he'd choose differently. But after his father was killed, Adrian felt he had to step up. Protect me. Protect what was ours. She looked back at Mira. He's not a good man by most standards, but he's a good son. Mira chose her words carefully. He seems to care about you very much. He does, and that's why your kindness matters so much. You didn't know who I was. You didn't calculate odds or weigh consequences. You just helped. Margaret's eyes glistened. That kind of goodness is rare in our world. I'm not special, Margaret. I just did what needed to be done. That's exactly what makes you special. Margaret set down her cup. Adrian tells me you refused his money, that you won't accept any help. I can't be bought. No one's trying to buy you, dear. Margaret's smile was sad. But you need to understand something about my son. He spent his entire life in a world where everything is a transaction. Loyalty is purchased. Protection is earned through fear. And then you. She shook her head in wonder. You saved his mother's life and asked for nothing. You broke his entire worldview. Mira thought about Adrian Voss's face in the diner, the confusion in his eyes. I just want to be left alone. Tyler and me, living our lives. I know, but you've made an impression whether you meant to or not. Margaret reached across and squeezed Mira's hand. I wanted to meet you so I could tell you this. You're safe. Both of you. Adrian won't let anything happen to you. Not because he owns you, but because you showed kindness to his mother. That means something in his world. And what happens when he decides I owe him something? He won't. Margaret's voice was firm. I won't let him. This isn't about debt or obligation. It's about... She paused, searching for the right words. It's about remembering that good people exist. That not everything is for sale. They talked for another hour about gardening, about Tyler's college applications, about Mira's parents and the restaurant they'd run. It was easy, comfortable in a way Mira hadn't expected. Margaret was funny, sharp, genuinely interested in Mira's life. But as the car drove her home through the fading afternoon light, Mira couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. She'd been drawn into something bigger than tea and conversation. And somewhere in the city, in an office with bulletproof windows, Adrian Voss listened to his head of security's report and made a decision that would change everything. Sir, we've detected unusual activity. Someone's been asking questions about the girl, about what happened at the diner. Adrian's expression didn't change, but his hand tightened on his glass of whiskey. Who? We're still trying to figure that out, but they're being careful. Professional. Find out who and make sure they don't get close to her. He paused. Or her brother. Yes, sir. Because kindness, Adrian Voss was learning, came with a price. And he was the one who'd have to pay it. Margaret called again 3 days later. Mira, dear, I hope I'm not bothering you. I was wondering, do you like the theater? I have tickets to a matinee on Thursday, and my usual companion canceled. Mira should have said no. She should have kept her distance. But she couldn't stop thinking about their conversation, about Margaret's kindness and the loneliness that flickered in her eyes when she talked about Adrian's world. I have to work until 3, Mira said. The show's at 7. Perfect timing. Please say yes. An old woman gets so tired of her own company. That's how it started. Thursday became dinner the following week, at a small Italian place Margaret loved, family-owned, where everyone knew her name but no one mentioned her son. Then it was Sunday brunch, with Margaret insisting Mira bring Tyler, who'd been suspicious until Margaret had asked about his chemistry project and actually listened to his 20-minute explanation of molecular bonds. "She's not what I expected," Tyler admitted on the walk home, carrying leftovers Margaret had insisted he take. "She's actually normal." But nothing about this was normal, and Mira knew it. She noticed the security, always there but never intrusive. The way restaurant owners refused to let Margaret pay, their smiles tight with fear. The careful distance other patrons kept. Like Margaret existed in a bubble no one dared to pop. Still, the friendship grew. Margaret started calling when she needed help with her garden. Her heart wasn't strong enough for heavy work anymore. Mira would come over on her days off, spending hours weeding flower beds and pruning roses while Margaret sat in a chair, directing her with gentle suggestions. "A little more to the left, dear." "Yes, perfect." They'd talk about everything. Margaret told stories about Adrian as a child, how he brought home stray cats, how he'd gotten in fights defending smaller kids, how he'd cried when his goldfish died. Stories that made him seem human, vulnerable, nothing like the man Mira had met at the diner. Mira told Margaret about her parents, about the night the police had come to her door, about holding Tyler while he sobbed, and making a promise to keep him safe no matter what. "You're a remarkable young woman," Margaret said one afternoon, watching Mira plant bulbs for spring. "Your parents would be so proud. I'm just trying not to screw up too badly. That's all any of us can do." Margaret was quiet for a moment. "Adrian asks about you, you know." Mira's hands stilled in the dirt. "Why?" "He's curious. You're the first person in 20 years who's told him no and lived to tell the tale." Margaret caught herself. "I'm sorry. That was tasteless." "It's okay." Mira sat back on her heels. "I know what he is, Margaret. I'm not naive. I know you're not. But you see past it to the boy he was. The one who's still in there somewhere." Margaret's voice was wistful. "I sometimes wonder if that boy is gone forever." "He saved me in a way," Mira said quietly. "Those men watching us. Tyler doesn't get bothered walking home anymore." Mrs. Rodriguez down the hall. Her landlord was threatening to evict her. Suddenly, the building got sold, and the new owner gave everyone new leases at the same rent. She looked at Margaret. "That's Adrian, isn't it?" Margaret didn't deny it. "He takes care of people I care about. That's how he shows love. By fixing their problems before they even ask. By making sure they're safe." Margaret reached over and touched Mira's dirt-stained hand. "He doesn't know how to do it any other way." Over the next few weeks, Mira fell into a routine. Work, home, Tyler, and 3 or 4 visits a week to Margaret. They'd read together. Margaret loved old novels. They'd watch black and white movies. Sometimes they'd just sit in comfortable silence. Mira doing homework for the online classes she'd secretly started taking again. Margaret knitting blankets she donated to hospitals. Felt like having a grandmother, like having family. Tyler noticed the change in Mira. "You smile more," he said one evening. "When you come back from Margaret's, she's good company. She's the Mafia Don's mother, Mira. She's a lonely old woman who likes flowers and bad puns." Mira pulled him into a hug. "And she asks about you constantly, your grades, your college applications, whether you're eating enough vegetables." "That's weird. That's sweet." But the reality of Margaret's world came crashing back one evening in late October. Mira arrived for dinner to find Margaret pale and shaken, Adrian pacing the conservatory like a caged animal. He stopped when he saw Mira, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be here today, Mira," Margaret said sharply. "Don't be rude, Mother. This isn't." He bit off the words, running a hand through his hair. For the first time, Mira saw past the controlled exterior to the stress underneath. "There's been a situation. It's not safe right now." "What kind of situation?" Mira asked. "The kind you don't need to know about." His voice was hard, protective. "Roberto will drive you home." "Adrian." "I invited Mira to dinner and we're having dinner," Margaret said with surprising steel. "Whatever business you have can wait." Mother and son stared at each other. A battle of wills Mira had seen before in her own home with Tyler. Despite everything, Despite the expensive house and the security and the violence that surrounded this family, they were just a mother and son who loved each other. Adrian broke first. He always did. Mira was learning where his mother was concerned. Fine, but security stays close. He looked at Mira, something almost like an apology in his eyes. I'm sorry you got pulled into this. Into what? Into being someone my mother cares about, he said quietly. That's not always safe. Then he left, and Mira watched him go, wondering what danger she couldn't see. And in a warehouse across the city, men with guns were asking questions about a waitress who'd gotten too close to the Voss family. The man showed up at Sal's diner on a Tuesday morning. He looked ordinary, mid-40s, brown jacket, ordering coffee and eggs. But something about him set off alarm bells in Mira's head. The way his eyes followed her every move. The way he smiled when she brought his order. Too friendly, too calculating. You're Mira Chin, right? He asked as she refilled his coffee. Every instinct screamed, danger. Across the diner, she caught Danny's eye. He'd noticed something was wrong. I helped a customer who had a medical emergency, she said carefully. That's all. That's all, he repeated, amused. You're modest. I like that. Tell me, how's your friendship with Mrs. Voss going? Must be nice spending time in that beautiful house. Meeting interesting people. I need to get back to work. His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop her. I'm just making conversation. No need to be rude. Let go of her. Danny had appeared, spatula in hand, like a weapon. He was 23 and rail-thin, but his voice didn't waver. The man released Mira's wrist, hands up in mock surrender. Easy, friend. Just talking. He stood, threw a 20 on the table. Thanks for the coffee, Ma. I'm sure we'll see each other again. He left. Mira's hands were shaking so hard she nearly dropped the coffee pot. You okay? Danny asked. I need to call someone. She pulled the business card from her pocket. The one Adrian had given her weeks ago. The one she'd sworn she'd never use. Her fingers trembled as she dialed. He answered on the first ring. Miss Chin, someone just approached me at the diner, asking about your mother, about me. A pause, then, describe him. She gave him every detail she could remember. She heard Adrian speaking to someone else. Rapid-fire instructions she couldn't make out. Are you still at work? Yes. Stay inside. Don't leave the building. Someone will be there in 10 minutes. Adrian, what's happening? His voice was ice. Someone's interested in my mother's connection to you. That makes you a target. He paused. I should have seen this coming. I'm sorry. The line went dead. The next 10 minutes crawled by. Mira served customers on autopilot, her mind racing. Danny stayed close, watching the door. Paula had called Sal, who'd emerged from his office looking grim. We're closing early today, Sal announced to the confused customers. Family emergency. The black SUV arrived exactly when Adrian had promised. But it wasn't one of his security team who entered. It was Adrian himself, followed by two men in dark suits who immediately positioned themselves by the windows. Miss Chin. His voice was professional, but his eyes were concerned. We need to talk privately. Sal led them to his office. Adrian waited until the door closed before speaking. The Castellano family, their rivals, have been trying to move into my territory for years. They learned about you through their own surveillance. He pulled out his phone, showed her a photo. Is this the man? It was him. The same cold smile. Yes. Adrienne's jaw tightened. His name is Frank Moretti. He's Castellano's information gatherer. If he approached you directly, they're planning something. Planning what? But even as she asked, her stomach twisted into knots. They think you're leverage, Adrian said quietly. A way to get to my mother, to get to me. But I'm nobody. You saved my mother's life. You visit her multiple times a week. She talks about you constantly. Something almost like pain crossed his face. In their eyes, that makes you family, and family can be used. The room spun. Mira gripped the edge of Sal's desk. Tyler. Oh God. Tyler, your brother is safe. I had him picked up from school 15 minutes ago. He's at my mother's house with 4 security guards. You took my brother? Mira's voice rose. You had no right. I had every right. Adrienne's control cracked. These people don't play games, Miss Chin. They don't send warnings. If Moretti knows about you, he knows about Tyler. And if I hadn't moved first, your brother would already be gone. The words hit like physical blows. Mira's knees went weak. Sal caught her arm, eased her into a chair. This is my fault, she whispered. I should have stayed away. I should have. This is not your fault. Adrian crouched in front of her, forcing her to meet his eyes. You were kind to an old woman. That's all. The fact that men like Castellano exist, that they prey on kindness, that's on us. On our world, not on you. What do I do? Adrian stood, his expression hardening into something dangerous. You let me handle this. You and Tyler stay somewhere safe until this is resolved. Resolved how? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. No. Mira stood up. No, I don't want anyone hurt because of me. There has to be another way. There isn't. His voice was final. I've lived in this world my entire life, Miss Chin. I know how it works. The Castellanos made a move. Now I respond. That's the only language they understand. Then I'll talk to them. I'll tell them I'm nothing to your family. They won't believe you, and even if they did, it's too late. They've already made you a piece on the board. Adrian moved toward the door. Roberto will take you to the house. Stay with my mother. Stay with Tyler and let me do what I do. Which is what? He looked back at her, and for the first time Mira saw the man everyone feared. Whatever it takes to keep you safe. Margaret's house felt like a prison. Even though the bars were invisible, Tyler was furious. He'd been pulled out of school by strangers, driven to a mansion, and told he couldn't leave. Now he paced the conservatory like a trapped animal while Mira tried to explain. They're trying to protect us, she said for the 3rd time. By kidnapping us? By making us prisoners? Tyler's voice cracked with anger and fear. This is insane, Mira. This whole thing is insane. I told you getting involved with these people was a mistake. I didn't get involved. I saved a woman's life. And now we're caught in a mob war. He stopped pacing, his eyes red. What happens to us? What happens when they decide we're too much trouble? Margaret appeared in the doorway, leaning on her cane. Tyler, dear, no one is going to hurt you. You have my word. With all due respect, Mrs. Voss, your word doesn't mean much when people are trying to use us as bait. Margaret flinched, but she didn't argue. Instead, she crossed to Tyler and took his hand. You're right. This is my world's fault. My son's fault. My fault for being someone that made you a target. Her voice was thick with emotion. I'm so sorry. Tyler's anger deflated. He was 17 trying to be tough, but he was still a kid who'd lost his parents and now faced dangers he didn't understand. I just want my sister safe. So do I, Margaret said softly. So does Adrian. That's why he's doing what he's doing. Which is what exactly? Mira asked. No one had told her anything since they'd arrived 3 hours ago. Margaret hesitated. Adrian is negotiating. Negotiating? The word felt wrong. What does that mean in his world? Before Margaret could answer, the sound of cars on gravel drew their attention. Through the window, Mira watched for SUVs pull up. Men emerged, Adrian's security team, tense and alert, and then Adrian himself, still in his suit, but with his tie loosened, looking exhausted. He entered through the side door, spotting them immediately. Mother, Miss Chin, Tyler. He nodded to each in turn. We need to talk. They gathered in Margaret's sitting room. Mira and Tyler on the sofa, Margaret in her chair, Adrian standing by the fireplace like he couldn't bear to sit still. The Castellanos want a meeting, he said without preamble. They claim they're not planning anything against you. They say Moretti was acting independently, trying to impress his bosses. Do you believe them? Mira asked. No. Adrienne's voice was flat. but they're offering to pull back completely if I agree to certain territorial concessions. So give them what they want, Tyler said. If it keeps us safe. Adrienne's laugh was bitter. It doesn't work that way. If I give in to this demand, I look weak. Every other family will try the same tactic. They'll find people I care about and threaten them until I give away everything I've built. Then what's the alternative? Mira's voice was quiet. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken violence. No, Margaret said firmly. Adrian, no. There has to be another way. There isn't. Adrian met his mother's eyes. They made a move against someone under my protection. If I don't respond, I might as well retire tomorrow. So, this is about pride? Mira stood up, her fear transforming into anger. About your reputation? About proving you're still dangerous? This is about survival, Adrian shot back. Mine? Yours? Everyone who depends on me. You think if I back down, the Castellanos will stop? They'll see weakness and push harder. Next time it won't be threats, it'll be bullets. Then let me go. The words came out before Mira fully thought them through. I'll leave the city, take Tyler, and disappear. Then I'm not your problem anymore. You think that solves anything? Adrian moved toward her, his intensity almost frightening. You think they'll just forget about you? You're connected to my mother now. That doesn't go away because you run. So, what's your solution? Start a war? I'm trying to avoid one. His control finally snapped. You have no idea what I've been doing for the past 6 hours. The calls I've made, the deals I've negotiated, trying to find a way out of this that doesn't end in blood. But every option leads back to the same problem. I can't protect you and maintain my position. Not both. The room went silent. Even Tyler had stopped fidgeting, sensing the weight of the moment. Unless, Adrian said quietly, his eyes on his mother, I make a different choice. Adrian, Margaret whispered. What are you thinking? He turned to face them all, and Mira saw something in his expression she'd never laid eyes on before. Uncertainty, vulnerability, maybe even fear. What if I walked away? He questioned. Not from you, Mom, but from the business. From the territories, the operations, all of it. Margaret's hand shot up to cover her mouth. Tyler's eyes grew wide with shock. Mira felt like she couldn't catch her breath. That's insane. One of Adrian's security guys blurted out from the doorway. Mira hadn't even noticed him standing there. Sir, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious, Roberto, Adrian responded. His voice was calm and steady now, like he'd reached a decision, and the burden of doubt had vanished. I've been searching for a way out for years. Maybe this is it. They'll never let you go, Roberto insisted, his tone laced with disbelief. The other families, your own people. Then I'll make it worth their while, Adrian countered. He turned his gaze to Mira. You asked what I do next. I'm going to do something I should have done ages ago. I'm going to choose something other than this life for us. Myra's voice cracked with emotion. You'd give up everything for people you barely even know? For your mother, Adrian corrected gently. Because she cares about you and because, he paused. Because you reminded me that there's another way to live, that kindness exists, that not everything has to be seized by force. Margaret was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. Tyler looked completely stunned, and Mira felt the full impact of what was unfolding. This man was willing to dismantle his entire empire because she'd saved his mother's life. How? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Adrian smiled, the first genuine smile she'd ever witnessed from him. Very carefully. The next 2 weeks were the strangest of Myra's life. She and Tyler stayed at Margaret's house, not as prisoners, but as guests, while Adrian orchestrated what he referred to as the transition. Mira watched from the sidelines as a criminal empire was methodically dismantled, piece by piece. It started with meetings. Men in expensive suits arrived at odd hours, sitting with Adrian in his study for conversations Mira wasn't allowed to hear. But she'd see them leave, some looking angry, some confused, all of them wary. Adrian was calling in favors, striking deals, transferring operations to other families in exchange for guarantees of safety. He's giving them what they've been wanting for years, Roberto explained one evening. He'd become an unexpected ally, checking on Mira and Tyler daily. Territory in the port, control of certain gambling operations, connections in the unions, things people have tried to take by force. He's just handing it all over. Why are they accepting it? Mira asked, bewildered. Because Adrian's smart. He's not leaving a power vacuum. He's choosing his successors, and he's making sure anyone who tries to hurt you or Margaret after he's out will face a united response from families that normally hate each other. It was both brilliant and terrifying. Adrian was using his power to render himself powerless in a way that protected everyone he cared about. But not everyone was happy. Mira overheard one particularly heated argument through the study door. You built this. A man's voice boomed, full of rage. Your father died for this, and you're throwing it all away for what? A waitress and your mother's feelings? Adrienne's response was cold and unwavering. I'm throwing it away because I choose to, because I'm tired, because I want one chance to live without constantly looking over my shoulder. They'll see it as weakness, the man retorted. Let them, Adrienne replied. I'm making sure that weakness doesn't hurt anyone else. Tyler struggled to comprehend everything. He'd spend hours in Margaret's library trying to make sense of the craziness they'd been thrust into. One night, he found Mira in the conservatory, staring out at the garden. Is he really doing this because of you? Tyler asked quietly. Because of us? Because of your sister's kindness? Margaret had appeared behind them, wrapped in a shawl. But also because he's been looking for an excuse to leave for years. Mira just gave him a reason that makes sense in his world. Protecting family. But we're not his family, Tyler protested, his voice laced with confusion. Aren't we? Margaret's smile was sad and knowing. Family isn't always blood, dear. Sometimes it's the people who show up, who care, who save your life in a diner without asking for anything in return. The final breakthrough came on a Tuesday. Adrian summoned them all to his study. Mira, Tyler, Margaret, and Roberto. He looked exhausted but relieved, like a man who'd been carrying a massive weight and finally set it down. It's done, he announced simply. The Castellanos have agreed to the terms. They get 3 of my territories, and in exchange, they've guaranteed that neither Mira nor Tyler will ever be touched by anyone. How can you trust them? Mira questioned, her voice filled with doubt. Because I made the deal too expensive to break. I've transferred ownership of the port operations to a neutral party, someone both families respect. If anything happens to you, that neutral party has instructions to burn the whole thing down. No one gets it. He leaned against his desk, his expression grim. It's mutually assured destruction. Not elegant but effective. What about the rest of your business? Margaret inquired. Parceled out to 5 different families. Some I sold legally through front companies. Some I just walked away from. By next week, I'll have no operations left except a few legitimate businesses I'm keeping. The room fell silent as everyone processed the enormity of what this meant. What will you do? Mira finally asked. Adrian glanced at his mother. I've always wanted to travel. See the places you used to tell me about when I was a kid. Maybe learn to do something normal. Something that doesn't involve violence or fear. You'll be bored in a week, Roberto predicted. But his voice was affectionate. Probably, Adrian almost smiled. But I'll be alive and more importantly, so will the people I care about. Tyler spoke up, his voice uncertain. What about us? Can we go home? You can do whatever you want, Adrian responded. The protection extends regardless of where you live or what you do. But he hesitated. My mother has grown very fond of both of you. If you're willing, I'd like you to stay in our lives. No obligations, no debt. Just family. Mira looked at Margaret, who was crying again. But this time they were happy tears. She thought about the past weeks, the fear and chaos, but also the warmth, the way Margaret had taught Tyler to play chess. The dinners where they'd laughed until their sides hurt, the unexpected sense of belonging. I need to get back to work, Mira said slowly. And Tyler needs to finish school. But she met Adrienne's eyes. Sunday dinners, holidays, that kind of family? That kind of family. Adrien agreed, his voice rough with emotion. Margaret crossed the room and pulled Mira into a fierce hug. "My girl," she whispered. "My brave, kind girl." 3 days later, Mira and Tyler returned to their apartment. It felt smaller than she remembered, shabbier somehow. But it was home. The watchers were gone. No more black sedans lurking outside. No more men with newspapers pretending not to pay attention. Just normal life returning, like waking from a dream, except for the envelope that arrived the next day. Inside was a letter from Adrien written in surprisingly neat handwriting. "Miss Chun," it read, "I've set up a trust for Tyler's education. Not a gift, a thank you. You gave my mother more time. You gave me a reason to change. That deserves more than I can ever repay. But since you won't accept money, I'm giving it to someone who needs it more. Tyler is brilliant. He deserves every opportunity. The trust is anonymous. Tell him it's a scholarship if that makes it easier to accept. Thank you for reminding me what it means to be human." Mira clutched the letter to her chest, tears streaming down her face. In trying to stay free, she'd somehow helped free someone else. 3 months passed in quiet normalcy. Mira returned to her shifts at Sal's diner. Tyler finished his college applications, 7 schools in total, all with full scholarships he genuinely believed were merit-based. They continued to have Sunday dinners at Margaret's house, where Adrien was slowly and hilariously failing to learn how to cook, much to everyone's amusement. "I can negotiate with the most dangerous men in America," he'd said, staring at a burnt lasagna. "But Italian food defeats me." It almost felt like they'd truly escaped, like the nightmare had been just that, a bad dream they'd all woken up from. Then Frank Moretti walked into the diner again. It was a Wednesday morning, slow and quiet. Mira was wiping down tables when the door chimed. She looked up and froze. Same brown jacket, same calculating smile, but something was different in his eyes, an undercurrent of anger, maybe, or resentment. "Hello again, Mira." Her hand moved instinctively toward her phone in her apron pocket, but Moretti raised his hands in a gesture of false peace. "Relax. I'm just here for coffee. That's still allowed, isn't it?" Danny was in the back. Paula hadn't arrived yet. Mira was effectively alone with a man who'd threatened her family just 3 months ago. "What do you want?" Her voice was steadier than she felt. "I want to congratulate you," he said, sliding into a booth. "You did it. You actually made Adrien Voss go soft, made him walk away from everything." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Do you have any idea what that did to the balance of power in the city?" "That wasn't my intention," she replied, her heart pounding in her chest. "Of course it wasn't. You're just a sweet girl who saved an old lady, right?" His voice dripped with sarcasm. "But intentions don't matter. Results do. And the result is that Adrien Voss dismantled a 30-year empire in 2 weeks, made deals that shifted millions of dollars, changed territorial lines that had been stable for decades." Myra's heart hammered against her ribs. "He's out. That's what you wanted, isn't it?" "What I wanted." Moretti laughed bitterly. "I didn't want anything. I was following orders. And now my boss, Castellano, he's got what he wanted. More territory, more power, more money." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "But some of us didn't get anything. Some of us watched Adrien hand over operations we'd worked years to infiltrate, operations that were supposed to be ours." "I don't understand what this has to do with me," Mira said, her voice trembling slightly. "You're the reason he left, Mira. You and that old woman. You made him weak." Moretti's expression hardened. "And I don't like loose ends." The threat was clear now, sending a chill through Myra's veins. "Adrien made deals. He protected us. You can't." "Adrien made deals with the bosses, with people who honor agreements." Moretti stood up, his movements slow and deliberate. "But I'm tired of taking orders. Tired of watching others get rich while I do the dirty work." He moved toward her slowly, his eyes narrowed. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to come with me quietly. We're going to take a little drive, and we're gonna see how much the great Adrian Voss really cares now that he's playing civilian. I'm not going anywhere with you, Mira stated, her voice laced with defiance despite the fear that gripped her. Then your brother dies. He pulled out his phone, showing her a photo. Tyler walking out of school, backpack slung over one shoulder, laughing with friends. The photo had clearly been taken today. I've got 2 men on him right now. You make a scene, you call for help, you do anything except walk out that door with me, and Tyler's dead before you finish dialing. Myra's world narrowed to that photo, to Tyler's smile, to the image of his whole life stretched out ahead of him. Everything she'd sacrificed to protect. Why? Her voice broke, barely a whisper. Why are you doing this? Because Adrian Voss took everything from me when he walked away. My chance at promotion, my future, my respect. Moretti's eyes were cold and devoid of emotion. So, I'm going to take something from him. I'm going to prove he's not untouchable. And you're going to help me do it. Myra's mind raced, desperately searching for an escape. She could scream, but Tyler would die. She could run, but Tyler would die. She could fight, but Tyler would die. Every option led to the same devastating outcome. Let me call him, she said quietly, pleading with him. Let me tell Adrian you're taking me. Then he'll come, and you can do whatever you're planning. But leave Tyler out of it. You think I'm stupid? The moment you call, Adrian mobilizes an army. He might be out of the game, but he still has friends, people who owe him more. Moretti grabbed her arm, his grip tight and painful. No calls, no messages. We're going to disappear for a few hours, let Adrian sweat, and then we'll see how much he's willing to give up to get you back. He was pulling her toward the door when Danny emerged from the kitchen. Mira, you okay? I'm fine, she said quickly, too quickly. Just stepping out for a minute. Danny's eyes narrowed. He'd been there the first time Moretti had shown up. He recognized him. You sure about that? Tell her she's sure, Moretti said, his hand still inside his jacket pocket. The implied threat crystal clear. I'm sure, Danny. It's fine. But as Moretti pushed her out the door, she met Danny's eyes and mouthed 2 words. Call Adrian. Danny's face went pale. He understood. The black car was already waiting, engine running. Moretti shoved Mira into the back seat. Another man sat in the driver's seat, silent and intimidating. As they pulled away from the diner, Mira watched through the rear window as Danny ran back inside, phone already pressed to his ear. She'd bought Tyler time. She'd warned Adrian. Now she just had to survive long enough for them to find her. Where are you taking me? She asked, trying to mask the fear in her voice. Moretti smiled, that same cold, unsettling smile. Somewhere the great Adrian Voss will never think to look. Somewhere that used to be his but isn't anymore. He was taking her into Castellano territory, into the one place Adrian no longer held any power. The warehouse reeked of rust and abandonment. Moretti had brought her to the old industrial district, a desolate landscape of crumbling buildings that hadn't seen legitimate business in decades. He tied her to a metal chair in what had once been an office, now just a derelict space with broken windows and peeling paint. Comfortable? He asked, checking his phone and pacing restlessly. Won't be long now. Once Adrian hears his little savior is missing, he'll come running. He won't, Mira said, though she wasn't entirely sure. He's out. You said so yourself. He's out of the business. Doesn't mean he stopped caring. Moretti crouched down in front of her, his eyes gleaming with a disturbing intensity. That's his weakness. Always has been. He loves too deeply, too completely. His mother, his people, and now you, the girl who saved his mother's life and made him believe in redemption. So, what's your plan? Kill me? That'll just bring him back into the game. Maybe that's what I want. Moretti's eyes glittered with something unstable, something almost manic. Maybe I want the old Adrian back, the dangerous one, because at least then things made sense. At least then we knew where we stood. He was unraveling. Mira realized this wasn't just about money or power. It was about a man who'd lost his sense of purpose. When Adrian walked away, Moretti's world had crumbled. Her phone buzzed in Moretti's pocket. He'd confiscated it when they'd arrived. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and a cruel smile spread across his face. 17 missed calls. Texts from Adrian, from Roberto, from Margaret. He showed her the latest message. Tell me what you want. Please don't hurt her. See, he does care. Then let me go. You've made your point. Not yet. Moretti typed something. Sent it. Then pocketed the phone again. Now we wait. Adrian stood in his mother's study. Phone pressed to his ear. Roberto and 4 other men surrounding him. Danny had called 30 minutes ago. 30 minutes of Mira being gone. In danger. Because Adrian had naively believed his deals would be enough. I should have killed Moretti when I had the chance, he said quietly, his voice filled with self-reproach. You didn't because you're not that man anymore, Margaret said from her chair, her voice firm. She looked fragile but fierce. Don't become him again, Adrian. Not even for this. Then what do I do? His voice cracked with desperation. She saved your life, Mom. She saved me. And now she's in danger because I wasn't thorough enough. His phone buzzed. A message from Myra's number. But not her words. Old Castellano Warehouse, District 9. Come alone or she dies. You have 1 hour. It's a trap, Roberto said immediately. He wants you there so he can prove something. Kill you, force you back in something. I don't care. Adrian was already moving toward the door. His jaw clenched. Son, please. Margaret's voice stopped him in his tracks. Think. You can't go back to that life. You can't. I'm not going back to anything. Adrienne's voice was still laced with exhaustion. But there was a new determination in it now. I'm going to get her. Then I'm going to make sure Frank Moretti never threatens anyone I care about again. How? Roberto asked, his voice laced with skepticism. You gave up your power. You have no soldiers, no territory in that district. Castellano controls it now. Adrian smiled grimly, a chilling expression that sent a shiver down Roberto's spine. Then I'll ask nicely. 20 minutes later, Adrian walked through the doors of Castellano's social club, a place of opulent excess and hushed conversations. A neutral ground where business deals were brokered and violence was strictly forbidden. Every head turned. Conversation ceased abruptly. The man who'd walked away from his empire had returned. Vincent Castellano himself emerged from the back room. A man in his 60s with silver hair and eyes as cold and predatory as a shark. Adrian Voss, he said, his voice a low rumble. I didn't expect to see you here again. I need a favor, Adrian stated, his voice unwavering. The room erupted in mocking laughter. Adrian stood still, letting the wave of derision wash over him. Castellano raised a hand for silence, his gaze fixed on Adrian. You need a favor from me. After you gave away half of what I wanted, destroyed the balance of power, and retired like some kind of saint? His smile was thin and dangerous. Why would I help you? Because Frank Moretti has kidnapped Mira Chun. He's holding her in one of your warehouses in District 9. Adrienne's voice didn't waver. And because we both know that wasn't authorized. Moretti's acting alone, probably planning to destabilize things even further. That's bad for both of us. Castellano's expression shifted, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do, or you will in about 30 seconds when your people tell you. Adrian pulled out his phone, showing him the message he'd received. He's using your territory, your resources without permission. That's a problem for you, Vincent. Makes you look weak, like you can't control your own men. The room had fallen silent again. Everyone understood what was happening. Adrian was playing the game one last time, but he was playing it smart, not with brute force but with cold, hard logic. Castellano's jaw tightened. He pulled out his own phone, made a call, listened intently, his face darkening with each passing second. Moretti is currently unauthorized in Warehouse 7 with a civilian hostage, he said into the phone, his voice clipped and furious. He looked back at Adrian. No one told me. Then we have a common problem, Adrian said quietly. I'm asking you to solve it. Why would I? Castellano challenged. Because I'm offering you something in return. Adrian pulled an envelope from inside his jacket. Deeds to 3 properties I kept, Prime real estate in the financial district, worth about 15 million. Yours free and clear if you get Mira Chun out safely and make sure Frank Moretti never threatens anyone again. Castellano took the envelope, examined the documents, his eyebrows slowly rising. You'd give me this for a waitress? For family, Adrian corrected. Yes. The older man studied him for a long moment, his gaze intense and probing. Then he nodded slowly. You really are out, aren't you? You really walked away. I did, Adrian confirmed. And you're not coming back? Never. Castellano made another call, his voice sharp and commanding. Warehouse 7, send everyone. Bring Moretti to me and don't let the girl get hurt. He hung up and looked back at Adrian. She'll be safe in 20 minutes. Thank you. Don't thank me. This is business. But Castellano's expression held something akin to respect. Though I'll say this, you surprised me, Voss. Most men in your position would have come in shooting. You came in negotiating. Maybe you really have changed. Adrian simply nodded and walked out, pulling out his phone to call his mother. Mira was back at the diner 2 days later. The thin red marks from the ropes that had bound her wrists were still faintly visible, hidden beneath the long sleeves of her uniform. Moretti was gone. No one said where he'd gone, and Mira didn't ask. She'd been rescued by Castellano's men, driven home in silence, and found Tyler waiting for her with Margaret and Adrian. Tyler had held her in a tight embrace for 20 minutes straight, sobbing into her shoulder. Margaret had made tea with shaking hands, and Adrian had stood by the window, his back to them all, his shoulders rigid with guilt. Now, as she refilled coffee cups and took orders, everything felt surreal, as if she'd lived through someone else's nightmare and woken up back in her own life. Table 9 needs ketchup, Paula called out, pulling Mira from her thoughts. Life moved forward. It always did. Sunday dinner at Margaret's had become sacred. Mira and Tyler arrived at 5 as always, but today felt different. Adrian met them at the door, and for the first time, Mira saw something unexpected in his expression. Nervousness. Before we eat, he said, his voice hesitant, I need to show you both something. He led them not to the dining room, but to his study. On the desk lay a folder, official-looking and thick with documents. What is this? Mira asked, her brow furrowed with curiosity. Tyler's college fund, the anonymous trust. Adrienne's voice was quiet and sincere. It's not enough. Not for what you deserve, what you've been through. So I've added to it. Tyler opened the folder, his eyes widening in disbelief as he scanned the pages. This is enough for 4 years at any school with living expenses, books, everything. It's paid for, Adrian confirmed. All of it. No loans, no debt. You choose where you want to go and you go. I can't accept. Mira started, her voice filled with protest. You can. Margaret appeared in the doorway, her eyes filled with warmth. Because it's not about owing or being bought. It's about giving someone who deserves a chance the ability to take it. She moved to Tyler, cupped his face in her hands, and smiled. Your sister gave up her dreams to raise you. Let us give those dreams back. Tyler looked at Mira, tears welling up in his eyes. Is this okay? She thought about her parents, about their restaurant, about working herself to exhaustion to make ends meet, about pride and independence and the crushing weight of doing everything alone. Then she looked at Margaret's hopeful face, at Adrienne's careful distance, at Tyler's desperate hope. Yes, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. It's okay. Tyler launched himself at Adrian in a hug that clearly surprised him. Adrian stood frozen for a moment, then slowly, tentatively, wrapped his arms around the boy, his eyes closing. Thank you, Tyler said, his voice choked with emotion. Thank you for everything. Dinner was chaotic and perfect, filled with laughter and love. Adrienne's lasagna had finally turned out edible, mostly because Margaret had supervised every step of the process. They ate and laughed and told stories. Tyler talked excitedly about MIT and Stanford, his top choices. Margaret shared gossip about her garden club. Mira felt the tension she'd carried for months finally begin to ease, replaced by a profound sense of peace. After dinner, while Tyler and Margaret played chess in the conservatory, Adrian found Mira in the garden. The late spring air was cool and fragrant, filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers, colors that seemed too bright and vibrant to be real. "I'm sorry," he said without preamble, his voice filled with remorse. "For everything, for the danger, for Moretti, for dragging you into my world. You didn't drag me anywhere." Mira turned to face him, her expression soft. "I made a choice to help your mother. Everything that came after that, that's not on you. It feels like it is. Then let it go." She smiled softly. "You gave up everything to keep us safe. You negotiated instead of fighting. You chose differently." She paused, her gaze meeting his. "My father used to say that the measure of a person isn't where they start, but whether they're willing to change. You changed, Adrian. That matters." He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw a fleeting glimpse of the boy Margaret had described. The one who'd saved stray cats and cried over goldfish. The one who'd been buried under years of violence, but never fully extinguished. Disappeared. "I just don't know how to be normal," he confessed, a raw honesty in his voice. "I haven't the slightest clue how to just be a person. Someone's son, someone's friend. I just don't get it." "None of us really do," Mira countered gently. "We're all just winging it, showing up and trying our best." From inside the house, a sound of pure elation. Tyler's triumphant shout. He'd finally managed to beat Margaret at chess. Her joyful laughter followed, bright and youthful. "She seems happy," Adrian observed softly, a hint of wonder in her tone. "Happier than I've seen her in ages." "So do you?" I pointed out. He seemed to mull this over, lost in thought for a moment. "Maybe it is strange. I spent 30 years building power, controlling every inch of my territory, making sure everyone feared me. And now, all I have is this house and whatever legitimate businesses I managed to hang on to. I should probably feel lost, adrift." "But you don't," I said, understanding dawning. "No." He smiled then, a genuine smile that lit up his whole face, reaching all the way to his eyes. "I actually feel free." 6 months later, Tyler was getting ready to leave for MIT. Mira was helping him pack, both of them alternating between tears and laughter. Margaret had already sent a whole stack of care packages ahead, filled with her famous homemade cookies, warm, cozy blankets, and a framed photo of one of their Sunday dinners. Adrian, ever the practical one, had arranged for Tyler to have his own apartment near campus, absolutely refusing to let him live in a dorm like some commoner, which had sent Tyler into a fit of laughter that lasted a solid 10 minutes. The goodbye was undoubtedly hard, but it was also brimming with hope and promise. Mira continued working at the diner, not out of necessity, but because she genuinely wanted to. She'd also enrolled back in community college, taking nursing classes. Maybe she'd save even more lives, she thought. Or maybe she'd finally discover her own true path. Sunday dinners remained a sacred tradition. Sometimes it was just Mira, Margaret, and Adrian, enjoying each other's company. Other times, Tyler would video call in from Boston, sharing stories of his new life. And sometimes, Roberto would join them, slowly but surely becoming an integral part of their strange, yet wonderfully chosen family. One Sunday in December, as snow gently fell outside, creating a picturesque scene, and a warm fire crackled merrily in the hearth, Margaret raised her wine glass, a look of deep emotion etched on her face. "To family," she said, her voice thick with feeling. "Not necessarily the family we're born into, but the one we choose for ourselves, the one we save, and the one that ultimately saves us." They clinked glasses together, Adrian, Mira, Tyler's face beaming on the laptop screen, even Roberto, who was leaning against the doorway, pretending not to be touched by the moment. "To family," they echoed in unison. And in that single moment, enveloped by warmth, love, and the incredibly unlikely friendship that had all started with a desperate act of CPR in a humble diner, Mira finally grasped the true meaning of what her mother had always said about not owing anyone anything. Because this wasn't about debts or obligations. It wasn't about transactions or power dynamics. It was about simply showing up, being present. It was about the incredible power of kindness, and how it could create ripples that had the potential to change absolutely everything. It was about a waitress who saved a life and, in doing so, accidentally ended up saving a soul in the process. And it was about a family, strange, imperfect, and utterly real, that had chosen each other when it mattered most. The end.